Okay, in this clip, I'm just continuing on page 375 from the bottom of 374. If not scruple, the scruple is like morals or a thought to be moral. To cheat the ignorant and the helpless out of their poor servings in order to partially appease the appetite. I have furnished 100 different kinds of wild and tame animals the opportunity to accumulate vast stores of food, but none of them would. Squirrels and the bees and certain birds made accumulations, but stopped when they had gathered a winter's supply and could not be persuaded to add it honestly or by chicane. Chicanery is like kind of cheating. In order to bolster up a tottering reputation, the ant pretended to store up supplies, but I was not deceived. I know the ant. These experiments convinced me there's a difference between man and higher animals. He is avariciously and miserly. They are not. So he's saying how greedy man is. He starts out with talking about how the wasteful animals, then in accumulating money and other things, possessions that we don't need, extra stuff, how animals take just what they need. In the course of my experiments, I convinced myself that among the animals, man is the only one that harbors insults, injuries, and broods over them, waits till a chance offers and takes revenge. The passion of revenge is unknown to higher animals. Roosters keep harems, but it's consistent by the consent of all their concubines. Therefore, no wrong is done. Men keep harems, but is by brute force, privileged, atrocious laws, by which the other sex was allowed no hand in the making. In this matter, a man occupies a far lower place than the rooster. Cats are loose in their morals, but consciously so. Man, in his descent from the cat, has brought the cat's looseness with him, but left the unconsciousness behind. The saving grace which excuses the cat is innocent, man is not. Indecency, vulgarity, obscenity, these are strictly confined to man. He invented them. Among the higher animals there is no trace of them. They hide nothing, they're not ashamed. Man with his soiled mind covers himself. He will not even enter a drawing room with his breast and back naked. So alive are he and his mates to indecent suggestion. Man is the animal that laughs, but so does the monkey, as Mr. Darwin pointed out, and so does the Australian bird. It is called the laughing jackass. No, man is the animal that blushes. He's the only one that doesn't, or has occasion to. At the head of this article, we saw how 3 monks were burnt to death a few days ago and prior put to death with atrocious cruelty. Do we inquire into the details? No. Or should we find out that Pryor was subjected to unprintable mutilations? Man, when he is the North American Indian, gouges out his prisoner's eyes. When he is King John, with a nephew rendered troublesome, he uses red-hot iron, where he is a religious zealot dealing with heretics in the Middle Ages. He skins the captive alive and scatters the salt on his back. In Richard's time, he shuts up a multitude of Jewish families in a tower and sets fire to it. Columbus's time, he captures a family of Spanish Jews, but that is not printable in our day in England. A man is fined 10 shillings for beating his mother nearly to death with a chair. Another man is fined 40 shillings for having 4 pheasant eggs in his possession without being able to satisfactorily explain how he got them. Of all the animals, man is the only one that is cruel. He is the only one that inflicts pain of the pleasure of doing it. His trait is not known among higher animals. The cat plays with the frightened mouse, but she has this excuse that she does not know the mouse is suffering. The cat is moderate, unhumanly moderate. She only scares the mouse, she does not hurt it. She doesn't dig out its eyes or tear off its skin or drive splinters under its nails, man fashion, when she is done playing with it. She makes a sudden meal of it, puts it out of its trouble. Man is the cruel animal. He alone in that distinction. So if you notice, Twain had a whole list of ways that people inflict pain on one another and how they treat each other. The higher animals engage in individual fights, but never in organized masses. And he's talking about war here. Man is the only animal that deals in that atrocity of atrocities, war. He is the only one who gathers his brethren about him and goes forth in cold blood with calm pulse to exterminate his kind. He's the only animal that, for sordid wages, will march out, as the Hessians did in our revolution, as the boyish Prince Napoleon did in the Zulu War, and help slaughter the strangers of his own species who have done him no harm, with whom he has no quarrel. Man is the only animal that robs his helpless fellow of his country, takes possession out, and drives him out of it or destroys him. Man has done this in all the ages. There is not an acre of ground on the globe that is in possession of its rightful owner that has not been taken away from owner after owner, cycle after cycle, by force and bloodshed. Man is the only slave, and he's the only animal who enslaves. He has always been a slave in one form or another, and has held other slaves in bondage under him in one way or another. In our day, he is always some man's slave wages and does for man's work, and this slave has slaves under him for minor wages, and they do his work. The higher animals are the only ones who exclusively do their own work and provide their own living. Man is the only patriot. He sets himself apart in his own country, under his own flag, and sneers at other nations, and keeps multitudinous uniformed assassins on hand, that's an army, at heavy expense to grab the slices of other people's country and keep them from grabbing slices of his. And in intervals between campaigns, he washes the blood off his hands and works for the universal brotherhood of man with his mouth. Man is the religious animal. He's the only religious animal. He's the only animal that has a true religion, several of them. He's the only animal that loves his neighbor as himself and cuts his throat if his theology isn't straight. He has made a graveyard of the globe in trying to his honest best to smooth his brother's path to happiness in heaven. He was at it in the time of the Caesars. He was at it in Muhammad's time. He was at it in the time of the Inquisition. He was at it in France a couple of centuries. He was at it in England in Mary's day, and has been ever since he saw the first light. He is at it today in Crete, and he'll be at it somewhere else tomorrow. The higher animals have no religion, and we are told they are going to be left out in the hereafter. I wonder why. It seems questionable taste. Man is the reasoning animal, such is the claim. I think it's open to dispute. Indeed, my experiments have proven to me he is the unreasoning animal. Notice history as sketched above. It seems plain to me, whatever he is, he's not a reasoning animal. His record is the fantastic record of a maniac. I would consider the strongest count against his intelligence is the fact that with the record of backbone, he blandly sets himself up at the head of the animal lot, whereas by his own standards, he is the bottom one. In truth, man is incurably foolish. Simple things which, among other animals, easily learn, he is incapable of learning. Among my experiments was this. In an hour I taught a cat and a dog to be friends. I put them in a cage. Another hour I taught them to be friends with a rabbit. In the course of 2 days I was able to add a fox, a goose, a squirrel, and some doves. Finally a monkey. They lived together in peace, even affectionately. Next, in another cage, I confined an Irish Catholic from Tipperary, and as soon as he seemed tame, I added a Scottish Presbyterian from Aberdeen. Next, a Turk from Constantinople, a Greek Christian from Crete, an Armenian, a Methodist from the wilds of Arkansas, and a Buddhist from China, a Brahmin from Benares, and finally a Salvation Army colonel from Wapping. Then I stayed away 2 whole days. When I came back to note the results, the cage of higher animals was all right, but the other there was a chaos of gory odds and ends of turbans and fezzes and plaids and bones and flesh, not a specimen alive. These reasoning animals had disagreed on a theological detail and carried the matter to a higher court. So in the end, he kind of says he leaves these people together and they sort of harmed each other, whereas the animals didn't.